about the other parts of the circulatory system other than the heart. The heart is the main hub of our circulatory system, but there are other organs that are important, the blood vessels and then the blood itself. So we'll start today by talking about blood and blood vessels. So first off, blood itself, I know this looks like sort of a red liquid, but it's actually a mixture of several different things. Okay? It has a liquidy portion, which we call the plasma, which is basically just water. And then it's got a bunch of cells and cell fragments. And so we'll talk about each part of the blood, each component of the blood, and talk about what they're important for and what they do for the blood. Now the first is the plasma. Okay? The plasma of the blood is the liquid part, and it's actually most of the blood is plasma. 55%. And this is basically the same thing as lymph, or body fluid, that we talked about in the lymphatic system. It's the liquid that carries all the other parts in it.
Is there such thing as like hard blood?
No.
The dragons.
And the plasma is where various types of nutrients are dissolved. For example, glucose that your blood carries gets dissolved in this plasma. And vitamins and minerals and other things, they're in the plasma of the blood. There's also red blood cells. Okay? And red blood cells, we abbreviate a lot of times as RBC. Red blood cells, they kind of look like almost like donuts, but the middle is not hollow. But the middle's not hollow. So the middle is actually filled in there. So they're not hollow, but they do kind of look like that. They're these discs, and their job is to do what? What do red blood cells do? Hannah?
They store, like nutrients?
One specific, not quite nutrients, you could kind of think about it that way. They carry something.
Wait, I know this.
Plasma?
No, they're in the plasma.
Deoxygenated blood.
You're getting closer.
Oh,
They carry
oxygen.
oxygen.
Bam!
So when oxygen diffuses into your blood, it binds to the red blood cells. Red blood cells have a special protein in them that's called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein that contains iron, and this is why you need a source of iron in your diet, because your blood cells each contain this protein that has iron in it, and if you don't get enough iron, your blood cells won't be able to produce hemoglobin, and they can't carry enough oxygen, and you can get tired very easily. You can have very low energy, called anemia. So they have iron in them that carries the oxygen.
It's never this quiet.
And we have another type of blood cell. So we have red blood cells, and we also have white blood cells. Does anybody know what white blood cells do, Olivia?
Protect against viruses?
Yeah, they are our body's immune system. Okay.
Is that a bear holding a jug?
It's a red blood cell.
So yeah, it's red blood cell.
Oh.
So this is your body's defense system. That's what your immune system is, your white blood cells.
Is it body
And
cell?
they have there's various types of white blood cells. And they have very complex roles. Some identify foreign cells, invaders. Some engulf and destroy them. Some mark them. Some call in other cells. So there's lots of different types of white blood cells. And when you are sick, if you have a virus, if you have a cold or something, the number of white blood cells in your body increases. And it's one of the ways that a doctor can tell if you have an infection is by doing a blood cell count. And if they see you have an elevated number of white blood cells, they know you have some sort of infection somewhere in your body.
How do they do that?
They basically take a sample of blood. Now they have machines that can sort of count up, and they take a very small sample and they count how many red blood cells, how many white blood cells, and the number can give them some information.
What if there's more white than black?
There's never more white, but there may be a higher ratio of white blood cells to red. White blood cells are much larger than red blood cells. And again, they can be produced when they're needed. They don't have to, you don't have to always have high levels of white blood cells.
They look like a snowball.
Hannah?
Can you see the white blood cells, or are they just red if they're mixed with the blood?
No, they look different. They look different than red blood cells. They're not the same shape. They're not the same color, so they definitely look different.
Do they change the color of blood if there's a lot?
Not really. You wouldn't be able to tell. I'll get there in a minute. But platelets. Platelets are these cell fragments, these materials that float around in the blood, and what they do is they help your blood to clot.
They help
Now,
it clot?
yeah, is this
Like a cot.
a good thing
Oh.
or a bad thing or both?
Both.
All right. So when is a blood clot a good thing? Tommy?
When, like, there's a lot of bleeding. that
Yeah.
happens.
When a person has an injury, a cut, damage to a blood vessel, obviously they bleed. And what happens is once those blood vessels are open to the outside, exposed to the air, these platelets start to clump together. They attach to each other. And they form sort of this net over the damage to the blood vessel. And eventually, as more and more of these platelets build up, they kind of seal off that damage to the blood vessel so that a person stops bleeding. Okay? You know, if you get a cut and it bleeds a little bit, you're supposed to put pressure on it. And then platelets will start collecting against that cut until they completely seal it up, and then eventually you stop bleeding. Also, if you scrape, if you're playing lacrosse out on the turf and you slide across the turf and you get a big turf burn on your arm.
Stinks so
And
bad.
you bleed a little bit, but then what forms?
Yeah.
A scab. And a scab is basically a mixture of platelets, which stop you from bleeding,
Thank you.
along with blood cells in there. Some of the blood is in there. There's also bacteria can be trapped there. If it gets sort of white and there's pus in there, what do you think that pus is?
White blood cells.
White blood cells. Why are they there? Matt?
To protect from diseases entering?
Yeah, because if you got a cut and it got infected, it means there's some bacteria there. The white blood cells are destroying those bacteria, and they produce, there are many white blood cells, they destroy those bacteria, and that's what pus is, a mixture of bacteria and those pathogens. Real quickly, I'll tell you my pus story.
Yeah.
Alright, so when I was a little younger than you guys, I had my appendix removed. So I had to go for surgery, and your appendix is down here, right side of your abdomen. They cut it out.
Why?
It got infected, and it was, and if your appendix gets infected, if you don't have it removed, it's infected with bacteria. If it ruptures and it sort of
Explodes?
it doesn't explode, but if it breaks open inside of you, it sends all those bacteria into your body and can make you very, very sick and even kill you. So if you get appendicitis and your appendix is infected, they will do surgery and actually remove it before it bursts. So I had appendicitis. I was really sick. I think I told you guys I threw up 38 times in one day because of this appendicitis. Anyway, I go to the hospital. They do surgery. They take out my appendix. I'm fine. They sew it back up. And all right, I stay in the hospital for a couple days. Then I come home and I'm just recovering at home. I'm in my pajamas, and I'm there in my house. I can still distinctly remember it. And I was sitting there at the kitchen. We had this counter, and all of a sudden, I smelled something really horrible. It smelled like really bad, like rotting something. And
Was
so
it
I'm
you?
like looking around, and then I lift up my shirt, and I have pus all over me. The incision, the stitches had gotten infected
Oh.
and had basically broken open and spilled bacteria and pus all over, and I could smell the stench of it through my shirt. So I had to go to the, I had to go back to the hospital. The doctors had to reopen the incision, clean it
Yuck.
all out,
Damn.
disinfect it, give me antibiotics, sew me back up again, and
Let
then
your
it got
pus
back.
strip out.
So that's my story.
Cool.
All right,
You've been
Haley,
through a lot.
How old were you, Mr.
I was like 11 or 12.
Oh.
How did your appendix help you? What does it do?
Well, scientists used to think that the appendix had no purpose. It's, you know, in those pictures of the digestive system, when we had the large intestine goes up, over, and down, the part where it goes over, on your right side, there's a little looks like a little tail. It's a little extension of the intestine. And scientists used to think it didn't do anything. But recently, over the past few years, scientists think it actually holds on to bacteria that are good for us. You know, in your intestine, you have all these bacteria that help us. They help get certain vitamins from the foods we eat. Well, if the bacteria in your digestive system all die off, that can cause problems because you now can no longer get those vitamins. If you've ever been on like a very strong antibiotic for a long time,
Too long.
you could start to get like really bad stomach pains. One of the reasons is because the antibiotic kills not only the bacteria making you sick, but the good bacteria in your digestive system. And then you feel that you get sick.
Is that why it says like after like 24 days of use of this, you will start to feel like death?
I don't think it actually says that. But
Doesn't
yeah,
say
you can,
that,
it can
but
start
that's what it
to
feels
feel
like.
bad. You can start to get like cramping and diarrhea and stuff because
Okay.
those
that's-
bacteria are not
I'm gonna go
there.
there, but,
So anyway, people think, scientists now think the appendix can hold on to these good bacteria. So if inside of your digestive tract those bacteria die, we're not done yet, so don't put it away yet.
Don't put it away,
Those
guys.
bacteria can then recolonize your digestive tract and sort of reform.
I have this.
Dan?
I know how a blood clot could be bad.
All right, yeah, that's what my second part was. I asked you, see guys, come. Why is the blood clot good? Because it stops you from bleeding. But blood clots can also get how, Dan?
Because if one forms in like an artery or something, it can stop the blood flow.
Yes, if they form inside of your circulatory system where they shouldn't be, it can get lodged and stuck somewhere, cutting off the flow of blood and causing a stroke or some other issue. Hello? Okay. Yeah. Last slide here I want to talk about today. We just have a minute. But you can take a sample of blood from a person, put it in a machine called a centrifuge. This spins it around very, very quickly. And what happens is, because they have different densities, all the different parts of the blood separate from each other. You can actually look at a vial of blood that's been centrifuged, and you'll see it separates. What you have is the plasma is on top. It's this yellowish, clear sort of liquid. It's about 55%. The red blood cells are the most dense. They sink to the bottom. They're about 45%. And then white blood cells and platelets, they make up a small percentage of a healthy person's blood. Now that percentage, again, like I said, may increase if the person